Greetings, amigops, and top teners everywhere. This is Mike from Top 10 with Kyle and Mike. This week, as every week, I am joined by our lovely co-host Kyle, but in a special treat, I believe this is going to be a 2019 treat, we are joined by dear friend of the pod, Cody. Cody's going to be talking about something. I have no idea what the hell it is. We're going to debate it vigorously for somewhere between an hour and 6 hours or so. By the end of this episode, we will have a definitive list on this topic. All right, Cody, what are we talking about this week?
All right, guys, so we're recording this between Christmas and New Year's, and I find this time to be a great time to really load up on movie watching. There's not much to do outside. It's cold. And what I've been doing actually the last couple of holiday seasons is watching movies and series. So this top 10 will be top 10 movie trilogies.
Oh, baby.
Oh, this is one of those topics that Kyle and I have sort of circled a little bit. We've talked about this in the past, and I don't think have ever seriously considered a top 10 because it's a scary one. I love this. This is a good one to have a friend help us out with.
I'm a little nervous because you guys are both movie experts, so I'm sure you guys will correct some of this, but I did my best, and I was really excited to make this list because there's a lot of good trilogies out there.
There are tons of them.
So here's my big question. Let's say that there are 5 movies in a series, and there's a 3-movie stretch that's great, but does it have to be 1 to 3? Like, does a 4th movie invalidate a trilogy? That kind of thing.
That's a great question, and I think the easiest answer I have is that it needs to be a clear 3. So in this case, I didn't consider long series like Harry Potter because there's no 3 that naturally are distinct from each other. Mm-hmm. But there are other cases where there might be a series where there's a distinct 3 and then maybe some loose hangers on the edge.
I can think of a couple where you have a full arc that closes with a 3rd movie, and then there might be sequels after that are kind of tangential. So I think that's a good way to approach it.
Yeah. Okay. I like this. I'm very excited about this.
So I think the biggest question will be, like, how we rank them, because, like, is it, like, the sum of, like, if you ranked each movie in a trilogy, like, 1 to 10, and, like, let's say you had 1 that was a 10, and 2 that were a 5, like, is that better than a movie that has, like, 3 7s? You know what I mean? Like,
I see the math you're saying. So I rated these trilogies on their completeness and how important each episode or each part of the trilogy fits into the full story. So, like, there are some of these where 1 or 2 of them stick out compared to the others, and those kind of got discounted for that.
Interesting. So in a series where you have 1 installment of a trilogy that's clearly significantly better than the other 2, you get lower because it's not as complete of a set.
Correct.
Interesting. Okay. Awesome. This is going to be a fun one.
I'm excited.
I really like this.
So, should I get started?
Yeah, what's number 10?
Please.
Well, number 10 is definitely a hometown pick. I'm definitely playing into the audience here. But number 10, I just went for the guilty Home Alone. And I figured it's number 10 so I can justify doing one that doesn't fit the criteria I just said. Because, because the 3rd movie in Home Alone does not fit at all with the first 2. No. I don't think it's even the same kid.
It's a different universe. Well, maybe not a different universe, but it's a different family at least.
But the first 2 are so damn good. And I just watched them last Christmas. So I've got a little bit of a recency bias, but I love both of those movies, and it was good enough to make it in my top 10.
What's interesting about those movies is that, like, even though the 3rd one is not at all related to the first 2, it's called Home Alone 3.
Yeah, it's strange. You think it might be something like Home Alone, The Re-Alonening, or something. Like, that would sort of make it distinct.
Something with a colon.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's especially weird because it's not like Home Alone 1 was Kevin McAllister, and then Home Alone 2 was another kid, and then Home Alone 3 was a third. It's 2 with Kevin, and then 1 with another kid.
I don't think there's even the same family in the 3rd one. No, it's just completely different.
Yeah, it's not the same robbers, there's no Joe Pesci.
Yeah, it's not called, like, The Next Alone. Like, there's nothing that makes it clear.
No, but yet it's called Home Alone 3, so I think it's fair to call it a trilogy, right?
I'm definitely using that
totally.
loophole.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I want to say one big thing about Home Alone, kind of without respect to quality. I think it's interesting to have a legitimate comedy trilogy because there's a couple legit comedy trilogies, but I respect the hell out of The Hustle. Like I think there's a degree to which it's just milking it because there's no real argument you can make that this is a complete arc that needs to be completed in 3, but I kind of like the balls in trying to make 3 comedy movies.
That is some foreshadowing to the not top 3.
Well, there are definitely some situations I can think of where it's like, all right, well, that didn't really need to be a trilogy.
I actually know what probably Cody's least favorite trilogy of all time is because we discussed this at length at work. And
I'm excited.
just to provide people with some context, Cody and I are friends because we worked together. We started at the same job, like within a week of each other out of school. And so we've spent a lot of time goofing off at work, talking about and honestly, Cody's part of the inspiration for this podcast because we used to rank stuff all the time at work. Like we would rank our favorite Starburst or Skittles flavors. So I'm excited about this because I think we've had a few of these conversations already, but
I like that. It brings us back to the roots of the pod, which is these random conversations that kind of we wanted to crystallize because that's the fun of how these friendships get made.
Precisely. I like Home Alone at 10. That's a good spot.
It couldn't be any higher.
No.
All right, so now I'll go into number 9. And number 9 is another movie where there's 2 really good ones and the third one kind of falls off. I chose Terminator.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm impressed by the quality I foresee in this list to have Terminator at number 9 because those first 2, yes, the third one is poopy, but those first 2 are so good.
T1 and T2 are like 2 of the greatest science fiction movies like ever made. And like, especially for that era, like to stand out in that era of science fiction is pretty impressive.
Yeah. And the effects, you and I just watched this, like 3 years ago? I rewatched her, I think, in both of our cases, but the effects really stand up in T2.
Especially in T2. With like the alloy stuff and the...
Yeah.
Also, just one of the best time travel movies. I think playing with that dynamic is very difficult to do well, and I think they really nail it.
Yeah.
It hangs together.
And the T1 and T2 naturally need each other, I think.
Yeah.
As part of this trilogy. T3, some debate. But
you could reasonably have ended that series and I would have felt fine if you had done it after 2. Right? Like, you don't necessarily need 3, like, really need it, I guess.
I think it's interesting that this exact arc is probably the arc that a lot of these trilogies follow, which is first movie, all these really cool ideas, really well done. Second movie, a perfection of the form. Like, you elevate the form. And then the third one, sort of unnecessary expansion of story. Like, that is a very common
I think you
cycle.
just laid it out perfectly as I'm looking through the rest of my list contenders.
I mean, that's like... obviously, we'll talk about this trilogy later on, but it's like a very famous trilogy that follows that exact kind of...
The trilogy, like, the most famous, if not the best, definitely the most famous trilogy very handsomely falls into that category.
Let's circle back on this because, okay, cool. But yeah, good pick at 9. It's like 2 stellar all-time movies followed up by a third movie that feels a little superfluous. But it's worth noting that even though there are follow-up Terminator movies, it's definitely the first 3 are its own thing.
I've only watched the first one. Did they make a second new Terminator?
There was Terminator Salvation, which listeners have heard us talk about on our Christian Bale podcast. And there's Terminator Genesis, which has Arnold in it again.
Oh,
and has Khaleesi, what's her face?
Emilia Clarke.
Yeah.
It has 2 Arnolds, right? It has real Arnold present day, and it has a computer generated Arnold.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh man.
I have an important question. Genesis. Am I remembering correctly? It's spelled with a Y somewhere.
Genisys. Terminator Genesis.
Jesus.
Like system.
Why?
You know?
Yikes.
So Terminator's number 9.
Yeah.
All right. I'll go into number 8.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Number 8 is just one of those trilogies where All three movies are great. There's not really too much story continuity other than that they exist in the same universe and have some similar characters. But I'm a sucker for these movies. Number 8's Jurassic Park.
I think this is a strong pick.
Yeah.
Jurassic Park is just one of the coolest movies. I just watched it last Christmas, all 3 in a row, and it really holds up. Like, the special effects are really good.
Yep.
Everything looks pretty realistic, and it struck fear into me.
As an adult or as a child?
As a grown man, I was afraid watching Jurassic Park 1.
The scene where they're in the van and it's raining and the T-Rex scene. Like that super famous T-Rex
the water
scene.
drop vibration.
I don't get tired of watching that particular scene. But yeah, like I think Jurassic Park is one of those series where it actually decreases in quality each time. Like I think Jurassic Park is the best one, and then the second, and then what's the
Lost World?
The Lost World
is
is 3, right? Yeah.
Yeah. But the thing, so I have two big feelings on this. One is about the quality, and it's that without the big expectations that presumably people had at the time, I think we can look back and more happily enjoy 2 and 3, because I think people had such high expectations that they were disappointed. But now looking back, 2 and 3 are actually pretty good. Like, those are enjoyable movies.
Don't get me wrong. I think both are really good movies. I just think that Jurassic Park, as opposed to this arc that we're talking about, where it goes good, amazing, maybe not so great.
Yeah.
Like, this is one that trends, like, the best is at the peak and they taper. But that being said, you're starting at such a lofty height of Jurassic Park that the second and third are still great.
Totally. And then my other thought I want to share on Jurassic Park for you, Cody, is if you haven't done so, there's a podcast Kyle and I love called The Rewatchables, where they talk about movies that they think have a great rewatchability factor, stuff that they would just jump in for an hour on cable. And they talk about Jurassic Park and the making of, and they do a really cool piece about the special effects and how Steven Spielberg was so afraid he couldn't bring his vision to life because the special effects wouldn't be good enough. It was really, really enjoyable. It's worth a listen.
I'll definitely have to check that out, because I'm a total sucker for Jurassic Park. They have a Jurassic Park ride at Universal, and it's awesome.
It's so good.
Yeah.
I don't want to spoil anything, but as a grown man on that ride, I shrieked like a child. Like
I actually did too.
At the waterfall part.
Oh man. Oh yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Oh god. They set you up for failure.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, they have such a goldmine with like the dinosaur IP that, like, I didn't like, even though Jurassic World and Fallen Kingdom aren't quite as like instill as much wonder in me as the originals do, I still enjoy those movies. Like, dinosaurs are just cool.
Well, you kind of raised an interesting point that I hadn't thought of, which is there really oddly are not that many competing dinosaur movies. Like, it's I guess they're so good and so renowned that what's the point? Like, why make a dinosaur movie? Steer for open waters. Go find another thing to do.
The only place you see it is like in the video game world. Like, you see a lot of like Turok and like things like that, but there's like no other really good live action dinosaur. You might see a dinosaur.
The good dinosaur?
Yeah.
The mediocre dinosaur.
The mediocre dinosaur. Yeah. You see like dinosaurs show up like in other movies. Like, there's a dinosaur in King Kong or in Ready Player One, but there are very few like, and there are animated dinosaur movies like Dinosaur. Remember that one?
Or Land Before Time.
Yeah.
It's creepy.
I like that movie. Anyways.
Jurassic Park is another one of those trilogies that they're like just kind of trying to milk with this second trilogy, and it's just not working completely. I just saw the second one that came out, I think, last summer, and just did not meet expectations. The first one, the first Jurassic World, I was like, oh, they might be onto something, and then the second one just kind of fell short.
Agreed. It definitely sold some Mercedes-Benzes, though.
No doubt. And I will definitely be seeing the third one next summer. Like,
100%.
Like, I'm still going to see it.
I'm going to pay money to watch
it. Totally.
Yeah.
It's just one of those great movie theater movies.
It's a great popcorn and like shared experience movie, I think. Or series in general.
Totally. When are they going to do the What the Hell Happened to the Pterodactyls movie? That's what I need to know. Where are they?
The spin-off Jurassic World, Pterodactyls.
Pterodactyls. Like, that would be fun if they do like a pun on pterodactyls. That's like the sub spin-off.
Let's get in touch with Universal.
Yeah.
So does that bring us to the not top 3?
It's time for the not top 3 now.
So, which means do you think we should do anything?
I think it's time for the music. Do you want to cue the music, Cody? All you have to do is say, like, cue music.
Cue the music.
Imagine an animation of like a jukebox, like he's just slid a quarter in and it like slides around. Then you know how in movies they show like the record being selected and then put down, and you hear the scratch of the vinyl,
and it says not top 3, and it's spinning.
Yeah.
So Cody, you said you're in a little bit of a backlog with our podcast. Have you listened since we've added the not top 3 music?
I have not. It's not top 3 music, so I was a little confused when you told me to
It's
cue
playing right now as we speak.
All right.
You're in for a treat. There, you'll hear some not top 3 music, intro music in the last couple of podcasts.
All right. So I actually did a not top 4 because I think these 4 really stood out in my mind, and I think this just describes me as a person, is that I'll always lean towards hating things over appreciating them. That I need to have extra not top 3. And Kyle was laughing because he knows this too well.
Yes.
So number 4 is kind of what Mike was alluding to in a comedy that just didn't need 2 movies, let alone 3, and it's The Hangover.
Yeah.
It's just too disappointing because the first one, it's complete. It's like the perfect comedy. They do everything right, and then they just do it again twice.
Yep.
It's the exact same plot.
Play that same song. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just couldn't believe, like, I understand, like, making a sequel to a comedy, but then really going for the third. I didn't even watch the third in theaters. I was just like, no.
Me neither.
I don't think I ever even saw the third.
So that one I think stands alone in really bad comedy trilogies that I can think of.
What's interesting though is that the first one is so good.
Amazing.
So like even having one good movie can't necessarily save a trilogy if the second and third are that bad.
I also think, Cody, what you're getting at, the reason that you're so offended, and rightly, is that it's insulting to the first movie. Like sometimes that's the problem, is it degrades and it messes with the sanctity of the first one, because the first one was just a unicorn, and it pisses all of us off that they would ruin that.
That's a good pick.
Yeah.
So number 3 on this not top 3, it's a little bit of a catch-all for just targeting children to go to the movie theaters multiple times. But this one I particularly dislike is Cars.
Interesting.
Great pick. I actually think that falls into a similar mold as Hangover.
I might just be a full-on Cars hater, but I dislike all 3 movies.
Really?
I've sat through all 3. I've disliked all 3.
I really like the first one. I think it fits not near the top, but like comfortably in the like Pixar pantheon. The second, it felt like it like skipped to the third part of a trilogy where it like expands the universe too fast and it like diluted it. And I think another thing you have to consider when talking about a Pixar trilogy specifically is that we're holding them to such incredibly high standards. I think that is part of my disappointment with Cars 2, because I think if you take Cars 2 in a vacuum and compare it to, let's pick another like kids movie, whatever, compare it to Hotel Transylvania 2.
Okay, yeah.
Cars 2 is probably it's so much better, right? But this is a problem. We'll probably talk about this on another podcast at some point. But like Pixar's tendency to like do sequels when I don't think they're necessary has been troubling in the past, and this trilogy is a perfect exemplification of that.
But those Cars movies do make a ridiculous amount of money in the merchandise.
They kill.
Yes.
Can't blame them.
Kids love car toys. And I haven't seen the third, so I can't speak to it, but I'm comfortable with this being where it is.
I think you bring up a good point though, Kyle, is that all of these in the not top 4, they weren't like horrible movies. I've watched them all and paid money to see most of them. It's falling short of the expectation of what it could have been, or like who made it, or what the storyline was, or what the universe they took on, and just doing a bad job at using those things. So number 2 on this list, I guess in that similar thought, is the Star Wars episodes 1 through 3.
Yeah.
Just, they have a perfect universe. They know that they're going to have millions of people line up to watch these movies. And instead of giving you cool, awesome Star Wars movies, they give you a lot of politics and
space politics.
Padme.
Yeah.
And Shakespeare.
We've talked about this before. I don't understand. Now, Natalie Portman is like Rick Porcello. It's no hitter, 7 runs. Perfect game, 9 runs. She's just so unpredictable. She's so bad in these movies.
Yeah, Attack of the Clones, Black Swan. Like,
yes, seriously. It's so weird. And she's so inconsistent. But, have you guys ever seen the Simpsons spoof of, the new trilogy or the old new trilogy now?
No.
It's very entertaining. They just show like people talking about bills that are being passed through the Imperial Congress. Oh, please stop. So painful.
What's weird about this trilogy is I don't know if there are very many others like it. They were like, we have a killer idea for a third movie.
Yeah.
How do we fill up 2 movies prior to that? We have no idea. But like,
that's a great point.
I love, not ironically, not nostalgically, I love Revenge of the Sith. Like,
it's a great movie.
That movie is great. And it like scoots a little quickly through the whole like Anakin thing, but in general, I think it's really well paced, has incredible action sequences, pays off really well. So it's the same as what we've been talking about, where you have one good movie and 2 shitty ones, but the good one is the third one.
Kyle, you make a really interesting point. I never thought about this, that they may actually have just said we should do the Vader story, and they're like, well, we can't without doing this. And like, George Lucas is just such a structure humper and such like he loves history. And
that's a great one.
He probably just thought it needed to be a trilogy and he couldn't violate the sanctity of the trilogy format. And so just was like, all right, what 2 other movies can I shit out that will lead inevitably to this third thing?
I really believe that's how it happened.
You're so right. I think that is what happened.
Because the third movie seems so well thought out, and it really makes a ton of sense. And the first is like, the second movie, I love Phantom Menace still because...
Ironically though, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Just because I have a special relationship with it. Like, I saw it with my dad. It was the first Star Wars movie I saw. Yeah. By the time I saw Attack of the Clones, I was wise. And I hate that movie. So, but this is a good pick, because you're right. Like, it falls victim to exceedingly stupidly high expectations. But also in a vacuum, I think 2 of these movies just aren't very good.
No, they're not.
Yeah.
But Star Wars did just do a great job at spacing out these trilogies, because thinking about it now, like you saying this is your first Star Wars movie, it was also mine. And it kind of, if I don't watch these movies and like them as a little kid, I probably don't get as into the original, which we'll talk about later.
Right.
But, and then now they're doing the same thing with this third trilogy. I got 2 young brother-in-laws that are now getting into the Star Wars just because of this. And I think kind of makes it a family experience almost.
I like that they're generational. Mm-hmm. Like our parents, their generation, they had theirs. We had ours, for better or for worse. Kids their age are having theirs. That's why I'm worried about the dilution of that universe, because I think it's cool that you have to wait 10 years between trilogies, but we'll see how it goes.
Just like one more thing about this original trilogy. The villains are cool, but so poorly thought out. Like, Darth Maul, they're just like, let's just make this cool, terrifying looking thing. Let's give him the coolest lightsaber. Let's give him, like, martial arts skills that no other Jedi has. Like, every other Jedi is standing flat-footed, swinging their lightsaber, but Darth Maul's doing backflips with a double lightsaber. Like, just one of the coolest villains, and then they're just like, alright, but we gotta go on to the next villain. And then Dooku just feels like a mistake.
I think they just wanted to get Chris Lee in, which is fine, but that was too bad.
And then who's one of the big guys in the third one? He's
Grievous.
Like a robot. Yeah, Grievous. Like,
General
cool,
Grievous.
Like a
super cool
villain,
idea.
but like
coughing. He coughed a lot. Don't forget, he's a robot.
He's a cyborg, technically, right?
Yes.
He has a beating heart.
Yeah.
But like cool looking villains, they definitely get you excited.
Really,
but, like, no character.
Really, really cool action figures.
Yes, they
amazing
sell
action
a lot
figures.
of toys.
I'm sure people like playing those characters in video games.
Can confirm.
Yes. 10 out of 10 would recommend.
Yep.
All right, before I make this podcast entirely just not top things, I'll wrap it up quickly, and I think Kyle knows what's coming here for number 1. And it's also just something that didn't need to be a trilogy, fell really short of expectations. It's The Hobbit.
Yeah.
Ugh. I forgot about The Hobbit. Thanks.
I'm sorry.
You're so right.
It is by far the most unneeded trilogy that exists.
It's really too bad. And it would be one thing if they took one book and they stretched it into 3 and they made them as brilliant as the Lord of the Rings movies are. But they're like, let's do 3 and let's make them all pretty bad.
Well, let's be fair. Smaug was good. That's a good movie.
But it actually follows the right trajectory, right? Like the first one is like world building, like reintroducing us to this Middle Earth. Second one is, like you said, like epitomizing like what you'd expect from this kind of series. And the third one is hot trash.
That third one is one of the worst movies I've ever watched all the way through.
Yeah. We talked about these movies a lot in the battle scenes podcast, like the fact that they went CGI over practical effects. There's a lot wrong with these movies.
That's the biggest thing, though. That's the biggest sin, is visual.
I actually have 2 that I can think of that I would put on this list as honorable mentions that I don't think we'll talk about on your actual list.
Yeah, I'd hope so.
The Taken trilogy.
Oh, I totally whiffed that. Yeah, that's definitely...
Taken is a great film. It's a great movie. I believe that.
Standalone.
The second movie is not so much. The third one is utter hot garbage. It's really
Kyle, can
really
you tell me and the audience, does the same person get taken 3 times? Please say no.
No. So in the second one, it's kind of a clever role reversal, right? Liam Neeson gets taken, and Kim has to figure it out and save him.
Oh my god!
In the third one, no one even gets taken. His ex-wife gets killed at the very beginning.
Oh,
and it's like a revenge movie, and it's like no one has been taken. Like no one has been kidnapped. It's not a rescue mission. He's just like, I'm gonna kill some people. So that's that's like what cements it in this not top 3 for me. Is like by the third movie, like we've bailed on the concept entirely. Like no one's even getting taken.
Oh, that's painful.
And then
it is the third one's not about toys.
Yeah. And then the other one I'll throw on here, similar to Star Wars 1 through 3, the third movie is incredible. The first 2 are bad, is the Thor trilogy within the Marvel Universe.
Oh. Yeah, good pick. Another good pick.
Those were tough for me to consider trilogies because, you know, the Avengers universe is kind of all blended into like one series. But I totally agree with you. That new Thor movie blew me away.
It was incredible. And Thor 1 was pretty underwhelming, especially on the heels of Iron Man and Captain America. And Thor 2, I think, is still the worst movie out of like the 20 that they've done.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Can I throw one series in here? Under the very unnecessary heading is the Fockers trilogy.
Oh my god. They've made a third?
Yeah, Little Fockers.
Yeah.
So, Meet the Parents is a comedy classic. Like, it's a classic. That is a legitimate comedy classic.
It is, yeah.
Fantastic movie. There are iconic scenes left and right, spray painting the tail, the volleyball scene, everything. Second one is bad. Like, pretty bad. The third one is just a disaster. So, that's one that I want on this list.
I like it.
I love it.
Yeah.
Let's move on to number 7
let's get
ready.
back to good trilogies here.
I
think we've exhausted the bad ones.
For now.
Yeah.
So for number 7, kind of similar to number 8 in one that's trying to reinvent itself or just milk money, is Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is what when you at first said like a trilogy that has like a clear beginning and end and then tack on movies, like literally at the end of at the end of Last Crusade, like he and Sean Connery are literally riding into the sunset. Like it's a full ride. Like literally they ride into the sunset. That is the end of the film. And probably should have been the end of the series. So like we can not completely dismiss, what's the fourth one? The Crystal Skull.
Crystal Skull, man.
But I think it's extremely fair to say that this is a trilogy unto itself.
And a great one at that.
Yes.
Harrison Ford at his finest.
Arguably. This part of his career is like such a ridiculous heater that like has maybe never been matched. Like he was Indiana Jones and Han Solo at the same time. And then he was Deckard and, Blade Runner. And then he did The Fugitive not too long after that. Air Force One.
He was Jack Ryan.
Like he's Hall of Fame stretch. But anyways, like to a lot of people, Harrison Ford is Indiana Jones. And I think, these movies pretty well, stack up to each other, with the exception, I think a lot of people don't really like Temple of Doom, myself included. I'm not a huge fan of it, but Last Crusade and Raiders are two legendary movies.
Yeah.
These movies are interesting in that they don't really have, other than Indiana Jones and sometimes his dad, they don't really have character continuity. I think he has a different woman in all three movies. Like, you don't really care about the side chick. It's kind of Bond-like in that you only are caring about Harrison Ford and what he's doing. There's not really any segues between the movies. They kind of stand alone in terms of
That's true.
development, but they're still amazing, and I'm not going to complain one bit.
No, agreed. I think it's more of like the trilogy wraps, like his progression is like a guy who's like it's like a video game series we love, Uncharted. Like a guy who like continues to risk his life and like needs the adventure, and the third movie is about accepting like that's not all there is to life, and like that's how it wraps up. Which so like it's not necessarily like a character arc for anyone else but Indiana, but it's an effective one for him.
Yeah.
I don't really have anything else. Just going back to that, they try to bring back one of the female characters for the new one, and then they have a kid, and it ends up being the dork from what's his name?
Shia LaBeouf.
Yeah, Shia LaBeouf ends up being the new Indiana Jones. And
I don't actually hate that movie because I think in my head I can separate it from the first three, but it's definitely not as good as the first three for sure. But yeah, I like this pick. Like I said, Raiders and Last Crusade are all-timers. So.
Yeah, and just movies made in this era, they kind of dominate this trilogy effect. You don't really see as many modern trilogies you'll see as we get on.
Yeah.
It's just like a more defining thing with movies made in this time.
Yeah.
It's a really good point.
I think it's when it began to be popular, to like serialize stuff, right?
Yeah.
It's an interesting thought.
All right, so I'll move on to number 6. Another Spielberg classic, Back to the Future.
Yeah.
I just watched these, so this is the series out of all of these on my list that I've most recently watched, and just watched them during some downtime during this winter season, and they're so good. And my favorite thing is that when some of these movies, they just made a really good first movie, and then they're like, okay, let's make this into a series. Like, they were testing the waters with the first one. They went full in, because the beginning of this, or the first part of this trilogy clearly sets up a sequel. Like, they were all in on the trilogy from day one.
At least the sequel, because that's literally how the movie ends. It's like, hey, we're actually going back to the future in the sequel. But a lot of people will tell you Back to the Future 2 is, if not just as good as Back to the Future, even better, some people say. And then the third one, I think, and people in general agree is not as good as the first two. And I haven't seen that one in its entirety, so I can't talk to it, but.
Probably for the better. It definitely tails off a little bit.
Don't they go back to the frontier times?
Yeah, like 1800s.
I was gonna say, yeah, this is like the Old West, right?
Yeah.
Which is kind of fun, but I think it's just more interesting to see how they interpret the future to be in the 80s.
Right.
And seeing that the Cubs win the World Series.
That is probably, cause isn't the year, was it like 2016 or 15 or something?
It was pretty darn close. If it wasn't the exact year, it was close.
It was 1 year early, I think.
Yeah.
So I think he went to 2015, and
it happened in 16.
Yeah, the Cubs actually won in 16.
It's just funny to think, like, exactly what you just said, like, what they thought 2015 was going to look like, because they've got and it's kind of, like, this is a cultural thing, because, like, Nike made, like, the Back to the Future shoes, and, like, when people talk about hoverboards, they talk about them like the hoverboards from Back to the Future. Like, we're, like, trying to attain that ideal future now, kind of, and, like, some of the tech stuff that's going on, which is funny.
There was one part that really made me laugh, is that in the future, they have what they, like, jokingly call, like, a vintage diner style, like, 80s style restaurant. They're like, oh yeah, in the future, they're mimicking this 80s style restaurant. And that's something we still do today, is, like, there's tons of diners that try to do that same thing. So they really kind of captured that well.
Yeah. That's awesome.
A robot doesn't take your order, though, today.
Not yet.
That's true.
Well, you do have, like, at an Applebee's, you can order from the table.
Yeah, or like Panera now, you can just type it into the tablet. So I guess they weren't too far off.
Yeah.
Alright, so that's number 6. Do you guys have anything else you wanted to say about Back to the Future?
I think that's a solid spot for it.
Agreed.
I'm gonna go to number 5, and this one, I would honestly put it higher if they didn't break my heart. It's Toy Story. And by break my heart, I mean, I don't I guess I'm just anti-Toy Story 4 at this point. I'm the old man, get off my lawn. I'm nervous what they're going to do with it. I guess I haven't seen a lot of material on it, but I just thought it was just such a complete story. Certainly didn't need a fourth. Or if you were going to expand like a Toy Story movie, don't call it 4, call it something different so that I can think of these 3 movies as one complete Toy Story. But that's just me being selfish.
What I think is neat about this series is that, like, I legitimately don't think anyone could make a serious argument that one movie is better or worse than any of the others. Like, you can make a legitimate case that 1, 2, or 3 is the best or worst in the series, which is wild to think about. Like,
very easily. Now that I'm doing the arguments in my head, every pro, every con stands up.
right. And, like, I can't think of another trilogy that's like that. Like, there's one that's clearly better or one that's clearly worse, generally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And this series, I couldn't pick one. I know what my personal favorite is, but
You would accept someone's argument that it's also the worst.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I think this series gets bonus points because, and I think that's more so for people our age because the sequencing with which they came out matched our actual childhood development. So like,
We are Andy.
right. So when Toy Story 3 came out, we were going to college, which is why that movie hit you like a sack of bricks right in the stomach. So like for that reason, this trilogy like has a higher place in my heart and I would put it higher than 5. I'm not as skeptical as you are about Toy Story 4 because I think if anyone has earned my trust to make a 4th movie, it's the Toy Story team. Specifically, I don't want to say Pixar because we just talked about Cars, and I don't like what they've done with some of their other sequels, but the Toy Story team specifically has crafted such a perfect trilogy that I believe that they are hopefully going to tastefully address a 4th film.
So do you think the creation of Toy Story 4 eliminates Toy Story from being a trilogy in the future? That's what I'm confused about.
It depends. I think we might have an Indiana Jones situation where like the first 3 are their own complete arc and the 4th is something separate.
The reason why I say that is I actually wrote down the year most of these movies were made just to see like how natural was this trilogy. And I was really surprised to see the gap between Toy Story 2 and Toy Story 3. So Toy Story 1 was made in 95.
Yeah.
2 was made in 99. And then 3 was made in 2010. So there was an 11-year gap in that. So this is actually a shorter gap. The gap between 2 and 3 is longer than the gap between 3 and 4, but it felt so natural the way they did it because no one was really calling for a Toy Story movie at that time, but they did it and they did it right.
Yeah.
And it kind of kept the story going. I'm not sure where they go now. Like, are kids just going to be running around with tablets and toys are being recycled? Like,
Maybe.
That's actually not a terrible idea. I think the way I would look at this is it will depend on how they treat Andy. Because if they move away from Andy as they promised, then I would call it the Andy trilogy and then the whatever else, the extended universe. So that would sort of be my barometer if we revisit this list after 4 comes out, is if they try to shoehorn Andy into this somehow, then it's a 4 movie, series and it's disqualified. Otherwise, I think we can safely say that Toy Story, the Andy trilogy, is on this list, and I agree with Kyle. Barring how we feel about, 1 through 4, my view probably higher.
No, that's totally fair. The only reason it's lower on this list is because of my anxiety towards the 4th one. I love Toy Story. It could have very well been 1, especially because what Kyle said about how all 3 of these are complete. All 3 of them are great, and not one stands out, which I'm looking at the 4 above. None of those pass that test.
Right. So we can discuss further when we get to our ranking portion.
All right. So do I go to number 4 or do we do honorables?
Do 4 and then we'll do honorables.
All right. So number 4, also one of those trilogies that just has 2 amazing parts and just one horrible part. Like, jokingly bad. It's The Godfather.
Yeah.
Godfather Part 1 and Part 2 are just 2 of the best made movies from start to finish. They both go so well together. They both just really make you feel so many emotions. And then the third one just makes you angry.
How do you feel about this, Mike? Because you're the resident expert.
I am a lover of The Godfather, a deep lover of The Godfather. Now, here's my question for you, Cody. And I sympathize utterly with what you're saying. When was the last time you watched Godfather Part 3? And how many times have you seen it?
I've only seen it once, and I watched it for the first time last Christmas.
Okay. That's actually recent enough, right, for you to have a realistic picture of it, because I think a lot of people had the experience of seeing 3 and being so angry that they've never revisited it, and they were just so mad. I've seen it twice. The second time, it wasn't as bad as I remembered it being. So I'm not stumping for Godfather Part 3. I just want to share my feeling that the third is not as bad as you remember if you watch it a second time. But yes, I agree. It is the classic case of 1 and 2 being, I mean, 1 and 2 are, like you were saying about Toy Story, there are two very credible arguments that 1 is the best, 2 is the best. Mm-hmm. They are 2 extraordinarily different movies if you watch them.
Oh yeah.
Dual timelines especially is what changes it so much in the second movie. Mm-hmm. They're so utterly different. The Michael character has developed so much that they feel so distinct and so unified in a way. And so they're just perfect. They're perfect movies. And it is such a sacrilege to have made that third movie in a way that screws them up. Even if upon further inspection, it's not as bad as you remembered. It's just, this would obviously be the number 1 on any list if the third was even serviceable compared to the first 2, because the first 2, once again on this, like, it's not only could you argue that 1 and 2 are the best of their trilogy, there are very plausible arguments that either 1 or 2 is the highest achievement in Western film. Like, you can really argue that either is the best movie ever made.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what makes it so sad that they had to make the third one so with first cousins and all. But you do bring up
What's
a great
your
point.
favorite, Cody?
I prefer 1 to 2. But you're really just asking, like,
it's so hard.
You're asking me to choose which one I love more
kid.
Between my mom and my dad at that point. Like, it's not really a fair question.
To go live with 1. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
So going back to the years made on this one.
Yeah.
1 and 2 are clearly a pair that were well thought out. 72 and 74. Mm-hmm. Part 3, I don't know if there was like production issues or like some sort of financial arguments, but they waited until 1990. So the 16-year gap.
Yeah. Interesting. I didn't realize it was that far apart.
It's a shocking amount of time. And these are movies that hang together 1 and 2 for a lot of reasons. The craft is number 1. It's just the craftsmanship is wildly off the charts in every sense. But one of the biggest things is that between 1 and 2, you see Al Pacino evolve from this fresh-faced, bright-eyed Marine hero into this soulless villain. And it's just incredible because he's close enough in age between 1 and 2 that you still see the Marine when you're watching the second one, but he's aged enough and his hair is slicked back a little more. He's a little more aligned. Like, you see the physical transformation and it works because it's exactly the right balance of change and stasis. But the third one, even if, let's just say they magically got the perfect script, everything was perfect, you would have been pulled out of the illusion because Al Pacino had transformed from that person to hoo-ah! Like, he hadn't made Scent of a Woman yet, but his voice had changed. He didn't look the same. It's like even the perfect version of that movie is thrown off by the fact that Al Pacino is 16 years older and has had a apparently eventful 16 intervening years.
I won't add anything to it. I think you nailed it.
Just a total side note, and you can feel free to cut this. But, so, I don't know if I downloaded the wrong version, but is it intentional that the scenes in Italy do not have subtitles?
No.
You probably, so,
you got a weird version.
So generally, not that I know anything about this, but if you were to download a movie off the internet, typically you have to download subtitle files separately and play them simultaneously.
Well,
really?
Well, no, I'm thinking because in other movies, when a foreign language is spoken, it's like built into the movie. It's not a subtitle. It's like built into the movie's film.
Yeah, it depends. Sometimes you, like, I watched the first, like, 40 minutes of, Rise of the Planet of the Apes without subtitles, which is interesting because, like, I still felt like I was getting it, and is a testament
That
to
is
how...
incredible.
Yeah.
No, so
And
actually,
then-
that makes me a little disappointed because I thought it was intentionally not subtitled when I was watching it, and it was like this like weird Sicilian Italian twist that like you don't know exactly what's going on, but like you can figure it out just by like the character.
Oh, this is so great.
It made it
No,
a more enjoyable movie experience to me. I felt like I was becoming an Italian.
Wow,
During
this is
my
so
life.
weird too because it's not, as Kyle was saying, it's not like a digital ad that's built into the disc. It's like actually on the screen because I remember it's yellow. It's it's like a funky shade that is specific to this movie. It is definitely on the reel.
Well, I guess I just downloaded the wrong version and it did change the movie experience for me.
I bet.
Yeah.
We were like, what's going on? But like you could kind of figure it out.
Yeah, these guys are Italian for sure.
That bomb definitely blew up.
Oh yeah. Y'all sure did.
All right, well, feel free to cut that because that makes me look pretty stupid.
No, we like that kind of.
Okay,
I think
well,
it's... yeah.
feel free to cut the part of me telling you to cut it.
All right. That's staying.
So now we'll go to the honorable mentions.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of mediocre trilogies out there as I went into my thought bank.
Mm-hmm.
So one of them that I wrote down is The Mighty Ducks.
The poor Mighty Ducks have been getting beat up lately on this pod.
I love that trilogy. I don't care. It deserved an honorable mention. I won't say anything else about it. I wrote down The Matrix.
Yeah.
Not that it's a good trilogy, but the first one is just so iconic.
Yeah.
And then they made two more. And then I wrote down the Pirates of the Caribbean trilogy. I appreciate that one. I actually, maybe it's because I watched those movies as a teenager. I thought they were so cool. Like, no other movie really captured pirates like that. And go ahead.
I agree with you. I think the first... I know people like to shit on the second one. That's my favorite. I love the second one. The third one is the classic over-expansion of a universe, and it made it a little too much fantasy for my taste. But definitely worth an honorable mention. Those movies are great. And the fourth one is among the worst movies I've ever seen.
I actually have not watched it, but I've heard it's just true garbage.
Is
that on Stranger Shores or whatever it's called?
It was on Stranger Tides. They so there are a bunch of scenes that take place on a pirate ship that, like, I truly believe they were actually on a sound set and they just draped black behind it to make it look like it was nighttime. Because the boat, like, and they didn't even, like, go to the trouble of, like, shaking the camera.
Swaying a little.
Like, they're just standing on, like, a boat with, like, a black backdrop behind them. It's, like,
incredible.
It's truly terrible. I hate that film. But the first three, I think, are enough of a set that counts. Yeah.
That one also is probably one that they made the first one as a standalone and then just kind of made a trilogy out of it. Because the first one was pretty complete.
Yeah.
It's very different too. That was my recollection is I rode for the first movie because it was just so different than the others.
Yeah. It's like, the whole concept of like this group of pirates that are cursed and then are freed from that curse fits very neatly into a box of one movie, but it also doesn't feel like the second and third dilute that either because there's just different elements of magic and stuff involved. But anyways.
The last of my honorable mention list is more for the ladies out there is High School Musical, which is one of the most bizarre trilogies because the first two were Disney Channel movies, not on theater.
Yeah.
And then the third one, they're like, oh, people love this, let's put it in theaters.
Yeah.
And they're not great films, but
well, I'll fight
they
you on
gave
that.
me great memories.
I think the first one is truly a very good, if not great movie because it it's fun to watch. Have you watched it?
Oh, it's a blast.
It's pretty entertaining.
The songs hold up too.
And it's fun to see a lot of young actors start like Vanessa Hudgens and Zac Efron and like some of those people are in it. It's actually
Tisdale.
Yeah, it's actually pretty good. And then I haven't seen the second or third, but like the first one was enough of a phenomenon that I think we could consider it like an actually good movie.
Yeah.
That's a good spot.
And the mere fact that three of them get made kind of proves because like I think that we're talking about different aims for some of these movies. Like, the aim of a kid's movie on Disney Channel is to get made. Like, that's the success. To get three made is great success.
Right. I agreed. I'll have a few more, but we'll wait until after you've done your top three, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. So, we'll start the top 3 here. At number 3 is, I would argue, you guys will probably have a little bit of backlash that there's one that stands above, but I think all 3 still stand really high. And maybe everyone would agree which one's the best, but then the second best is a little bit of an argument. I've got the Dark Knight trilogy.
Mm.
And it's not that any of these movies stack up to the Godfather movies, and they're probably not as complete as Toy Story, but all 3 of these movies are elite, in my opinion. They have your favorite Christian Bale doing amazing Batman things.
Yep.
And I think everyone will agree that the second one stands out as the best.
Yeah.
Yep.
And maybe some of the backlash that I had because I was a Batman Begins lover. It was one of my favorite movies when it came out. It's called Batman Begins, so they're clearly announcing that they're going to have a trilogy come out. But then no one knew that that movie existed when Dark Knight came out, and they're all just like, what do you mean there's a prequel?
Word.
Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
And I was just like a snobby high school kid being like, you shouldn't even like this movie because you didn't watch the first one. Like, and I'm not too proud to admit that, but that actually gives like me a little bit of disappointment in the trilogy was that people didn't know it was a trilogy when it came out, which is rare for all these others on the list.
That's true.
Yeah. You're making us very happy because Kyle and I would say, Kyle, I'll give us enough credit. We are rational thinking beings in most of our lives. Like, generally speaking, I think you and I are none too proud to hear arguments against our own. We know that we're wrong a lot. I don't think either of us has the emotional maturity to handle somebody who doesn't like Batman. Like, we don't have it. Like, I, for one, I don't have it. I don't have it in me to put up with that. I can't. I'm not capable of conceiving of a person who doesn't love these movies as much as we do. So you've made, I think, both of us very happy in your high esteem you've given for this trilogy.
Yeah, I think it's hard to make, as weird as it sounds, it's hard to make an argument that one of these movies is the worst of the 3, but it's easy to say that Dark Knight is the best.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. The first and the third are both great and
in very different ways.
yeah.
So, which is what's so cool.
Yeah.
We talked about this somewhat with the Chris Nolan discussion that we had, I think on the Christian Bale one maybe, or something else, but it's really cool. These are 3 movies that need each other in a lot of ways, but are very different from each other. I also think a cool, and I don't have any comment about the quality just because my feelings on this topic are well known. It's not going to add anything. Love them. But I think what's really cool about this trilogy is there exists in a very different and much happier parallel universe where Heath Ledger is still with us, a different trilogy. And it's both sad and really cool to think about that different trilogy because the third movie was going to be a Joker movie as well. And it's cool to think about what that might have been, but also, like I said, in a sad way, but this is the world we live in. Cool way that we got to see that other version with Tom Hardy.
I didn't know that was the case, that they would have done a third one with Joker, but interesting.
I think that was the idea. I'm sure Quinn can do some internet research and tell me I'm wrong, but my understanding was that was the plan. Like you and I are destined to do this forever was actually going to play out in a classic Joker escapes from Arkham scenario.
Yeah, there's no way he's not getting out of prison in that third one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, he definitely does in The Dark Knight Rises. Like, it's obviously, I'm glad it was left off the screen, but like, he's out there. Don't forget.
That's a really good point. I don't know. This movie, it's just become like kind of a phenomenon. Like the fact that the third one was as big of a deal as it was at the time is cool. And like, this movie is what caused like the Oscar, like the Academy literally to change their rules. Like people are so mad that The Dark Knight didn't get nominated for Best Picture. Like that counts for something. Like this series has like serious cultural relevance too. And
totally.
Like is now like for people our age and probably a little older, like the definitive Batman. So.
It is the Batman, and I think Christian Bale
Yeah.
just totally nails it, as he always does.
As do we.
He now doesn't get enough credit, which is remarkable. Like I said, I can talk about these movies forever, and we'll probably find a way to backdoor a pod to do that. But yes, you're so right. Christian Bale is now underappreciated for how good he was in this role.
And I think that really just rings even louder once you see Ben Affleck play Batman.
I think that does it.
Yep, that'll help.
Let's hit some tires.
Although I will say it's not his fault that those movies are so shitty.
No. He doesn't help the cause, but it's not...
it's okay.
The root is not him.
It's not entirely his fault.
Yeah.
All right. I suspect I know 2 and 1. I suspect I know the order, but let's do this.
Yeah, I think this will happen sometimes with these top 10s is you're building towards what you know is going to be the top.
But it's fun. I like it.
It's still fun. So number 2, and maybe you guys will battle on which 1 and 2. I think number 2 is maybe what I think in my head as the original trilogy, or like the most iconic trilogy. It's the Star Wars trilogy.
Yeah.
4 through 6.
Yeah.
And I think everyone has their opinion on... everyone has a similar opinion in which movies are the best. Everyone loves Emperor Strikes Back. A New Hope just creates a totally unique universe that no other movie had done before. And then, what's the name of 6? Return of the Jedi.
Too much.
A little bit too much, but not bad enough to make you not love the trilogy as much as you do.
Yeah.
And still like really effectively closes the loop. And like there's a lot of good in that movie. And it's just like a couple things at the end that people, myself included, don't love. You have to remember there's like so much good stuff in that movie. But this is what we were alluding to earlier. Like in a lot of trilogies, people will talk about the second movie as being the empire of this trilogy. Yeah. And like this is the poster child for the trajectory we're talking about. Mm-hmm. A New Hope, like you said, introduces this incredible new universe to us and lays out the stakes and all of that. The second one matures our characters and propels them to where they need to be and where they make most of their change. It's a little darker. And then the third one is a big kind of wrap up of all of that and maybe goes a little bit too far. Like this is the originator of that arc. And it's cool that other trilogies get talked about, like, within the framework of this trilogy. And, like, a lot of trilogies get compared to this one in their structure, which I think makes it easily a top 2, probably for me, number 1. But, like, this is like you said, not just the original trilogy of Star Wars, but, like one of the first, like, major trilogies. And it's especially interesting because they thought that Star Wars, the very first one, was gonna absolutely tank. That's why the credits aren't at the beginning. It's funny to think about.
Yeah, the first one, they definitely, in similar movies that we've talked about, it's a complete movie on its own. You know, Darth Vader goes flying off into space. It could be its own movie if it needed to be, but because people liked it, they were able to build, I think, the bigger picture of the whole story that George Lucas was envisioning all along.
I totally agree. I think that's an underrated cool thing about this is how perfect the first movie is and that it really can stand alone. I think that this is sort of a poster child for how to do a trilogy. Make a movie that can be its own movie, be happy with it if that's all you get, but then make it better as you go.
Yeah. And I love how I don't love how this new trilogy is mirroring it so closely in a lot of ways, but I do like that they're following
the Death Star.
Yeah.
It's 3 times bigger.
My God. I like that at the end of the second movie, in both cases, our heroes are in deep shit and are like kind of have their backs against the wall. I think that's a cool place to end a second movie. Mm-hmm. And it'd be interesting to see, like, if we did this podcast again in like 2 years, where episodes 7 through 9 would fall. Because I think these have potential depending on how this third one shakes out, but
I think they're leaning more towards the top 10 than the not top 3, as we saw with the episodes 1 through 3.
Agreed.
All right, and then I think I know what number 1 is.
Yeah, everyone knows number 1, and it's actually looking through it. I guess some of these are based partially on books, but this is one that's purely based on books, which is, I guess, kind of interesting. It's Lord of the Rings. I don't think anyone's surprised by that.
I wouldn't think so.
I know that you think that one of these is the weak link. I recently rewatched these, and it was difficult, and maybe I watched them in a marathon, as in, like, almost, so it was maybe harder for me to distinguish them between each other, but I think all 3 are just fantastic. I don't think there's one weak link in my mind, and they just nail it. I think all 3 movies are perfect.
They're as close to perfect as, like, movies of that scale can be, and, like, literally revolutionary in the way that they did set and character and special effect design. Like, nothing like that had been done before. I think if you were to point to one that's weaker, a lot of people would point to Fellowship just because it's a little slower.
Yeah.
I love that movie. Mike and I have the kind of contrarian take that we think Two Towers is the best. But you could make the case that
I like that.
Any of those three, most people wouldn't argue for Fellowship. A lot of people say, because
that's true.
And Return of the King won Best Picture, but I think it was kind of understood. This is like a Lifetime Achievement Award. Like, this is for all three of these movies as a, you know, and as impossible as it is, it makes sense to watch them in sequence like that because they're one.
They're continuous. It's really just one 10-hour special.
Right.
Yeah.
Which I think is unique in its own sense.
Mm-hmm.
I'm having the very enjoyable experience of listening to these on audiobook right now. So we've talked about this, Kyle, where I'm using audiobooks as a way to basically listen to two groups of books. One is classics that I would not want to look at on a page. And two is re-listening to books, fantasy books specifically, that I read as a kid or like a long time ago. And so you and I have talked about this before, that we've both basically forgotten the books and just the movies have replaced the books for us. So I'm having the very enjoyable experience of remembering what the books are like. And one thing I'm realizing as I'm listening is these movies made in my opinion, other than maybe the 10 endings in the third movie, but they made basically every right choice for where to cut, where to prune, where to shorten, where to lengthen, how to pace, how to sequence. Like, there were so many versions of this movie that would be really pretty unwatchable, but somehow Peter Jackson settled on the one version of each of these films that's pretty much perfect. Like, it's a pretty remarkable feat to walk that tightrope because there's so much content that you can drown in it. And I know there are some choices that the purists don't like, things that they skipped, but I think on balance, they skipped the stuff they needed to skip and just killed it.
They're essentially flawless. It's like hard to say that like a 4-hour movie, if you watch like the extended edition, is like trimmed appropriately, but they are.
Yeah.
But
also, the nostalgic factor is high for me on these. I remember, like, dang, did those movies just come out one year after the next? Like, it felt like every Christmas time those movies came out, and I looked it up, and lo and behold, 2001, 2002, 2003.
I think that adds
so
to it.
Cool.
Like,
yes.
They don't leave you hanging. They had to have just been so busy during that time to get those movies racked out the way they did. But it just made it so awesome to watch those movies one Christmas after the next.
That's unprecedented, and I think unlikely to ever happen again. The closest thing is like Avengers happening in consecutive summers, but that
was building for
that's not
3
movies.
years.
Yeah, and that's like a 10-year build-up. So yeah, that's a really, if you think about the real time, because like Star Wars happened and no one was sure that it was going to happen. A second one, and it became kind of a phenomenon. And I think those are 2 years apart each. But
yeah, 3 years apart each.
That's so cool. I didn't even think about that. Like when you saw Lord of the Rings, you knew it was a trilogy, so you knew there was going to be 3, and you probably knew I'm going to see the second one next year and I'm going to see the third one after that. In real time, it was, you were going into it with as a mindset of a trilogy. That's cool.
Totally.
They do have the advantage with, obviously, the reputation that the books had, and everyone kind of knew the story, or vaguely, at least. If you didn't read the books, you were kind of aware of the characters. So I think they had a little bit of an advantage in that sense, that everyone had already loved this story. They just wanted to see it come to life.
Amen. Let's talk some honorable mentions and then get to work, Mike.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna go quick because we're running long. So 3 that I think deserve honorable mention status that are a little bit older, that are really good. The original Mad Max movies, the Man with No Name trilogy, so that's Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Fistful of Dollars for a Few Dollars More, I think, is the original trilogy, but whatever. The Clint Eastwood is the Man with No Name movie.
The Fistful of Dollars trilogy or whatever.
Yeah, and then Alien, the original Alien trilogy.
Totally whiffed on.
So those would be... So Alien, I think, might actually make the list. The other 2, I think, are like strong honorable mentions. 2 more modern ones that I think are like strong honorables are Spider-Man.
Yep.
And Austin Powers. I know it's silly, but it's like as good of a comedy trilogy as there is out there. So those are some honorables. And then I'll just mention the 2 that I want on the list.
Yeah.
So these are two that I think should be on the list and should be reasonably high. Bourne. So the Bourne trilogy is 3 very close to perfect films. I think they've kind of gotten lost in the shuffle the last couple of years. I can make a longer case if need be if we agree to rank these, but the Bourne movies are incredible and represent 3 movies that actually get progressively better in a lot of ways. They're incredible. So Bourne, I think, should be on the list. And the other one, the most unexpected trilogy of our lifetimes and maybe ever. Kyle, you and I love this trilogy and still don't know why it got made or why it's good, but the Planet of the Apes. The recent Planet of the Apes. So those two, I think Bourne and Planet of the Apes should legitimately be on the list and be reasonably high.
I was thinking Planet of the Apes while we were talking about this. Shockingly. Have you seen these, Cody?
I actually haven't, and
they're shocking, literally shockingly good.
No reason for them to be good. Nothing should mean they'd be good, and they're not just good, they're incredible.
I will definitely put that on my holiday list.
And watch all 3. I prefer the second one over the other 2, but all 3 are in that realm of you couldn't really argue one too strongly over the other. And while the third one expands on the universe a lot, it does so in a really tasteful way, and it's
very responsible.
Yeah. I feel really good about that one potentially being on the list. If it weren't for Spider-Man 3, I would say Spider-Man actually deserves to be on there.
Yeah.
Alien, the third one, is so atrocious that I can't stump for it, even though Alien and Aliens are, maybe we should talk about it. Those are 2 of the defining horror science fiction films.
And there are some weak links, I think, at the bottom of this list. Home Alone definitely can get shot. I really just wanted it to be in the list and not an honorable mention.
So Kyle, do you have any others that you're thinking about?
Yeah, a couple others are, there are 2 separate X-Men trilogies that should at least get mentioned. You have X 1 through 3, and then you have the newer versions, which are fine, but I wouldn't stump for it too hard. Men in Black. The first 2, I like all 3 of those movies a lot. I think that
we really liked the third one.
I think it falls into a tier of all 3 are just good, and none of them is great. And then the last one that I feel really strongly about is the Captain America trilogy. I love that trilogy.
It's actually not a terrible take. I think, so this is, we can either agree or disagree on this, and that will be kind of a gating issue, but what Cody alluded to with the Marvel thing is it's hard to call, it's hard to classify these as a trilogy. But if we don't classify it or if we do, then I think it should be on the list. But if we don't, then it's off and we just love it.
Civil War is the problem, because Civil War is Avengers 2.5. It's not really Captain America 3, and it loosely kind of finishes an arc for Captain America, but not really. But if you want to just go by the letter of the law, that's the third Captain America movie. The first one is an incredible world builder. Winter Soldier is still my favorite Marvel film, and
Same.
3, for its flaws, is a hell of a good time. So it is a very, very, very strong honorable mention for me. But I agree. I'm serious about Planet of the Apes. I think Bourne probably deserves a spot. And I think Alien might... Well, let's talk about Alien. Because the first...
Well, we do have a couple at the back end that are exactly the same scenario as Alien.
Because
so I'm fine if we... Yeah.
Alien and Terminator are the same thing. So we have to ask
they're
ourselves...
exactly the same.
Is the combo of Alien and Aliens better than T1, T2? I think it just depends who you ask, right?
That's a toss. That's a big time toss up. But I think if we ask ourselves, is the combination of Aliens better than Home Alone 2? I feel better about that prospect.
I think Home Alone is getting bumped regardless.
Oh, 100%. Home Alone's gone. But what are some other ones in this top 10 that you guys think are vulnerable if we're going to add in multiple?
I think you ranked really well. I think the top we might want to do a little reordering, but I think you ranked, there's basically 2 tiers. There's the back end are movies where the third wasn't that great, and the top are ones where all hang together pretty well. So I'm kind of okay with shooting, 3 at the back of the list.
I think Home Alone goes for sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think we should pick one of Terminator or Alien. I don't know. It's hard. Jurassic Park, Indiana Jones, and Back to the Future both feel like they can't really be... if of those three, I think you were right to put Jurassic Park lowest.
Yeah, I think Jurassic Park is the most vulnerable of those three.
Yeah.
So I think you did a really good job because the three that we're looking at to move are the bottom three. So I think we just need to decide, do we like Bourne over Jurassic Park and do we like Alien over Terminator?
I think Bourne over Jurassic Park makes sense. Bourne is a more natural trilogy, whereas we kind of talked about Jurassic Park is kind of just the same movie 3 times with slightly different dinosaurs.
Though I would say that Bourne, to me, in a weird way, kind of doesn't feel like a trilogy because to me, the movies blend a little bit.
Mm.
You're not alone. Things happen twice sometimes, and it's a little weird.
It feels like that's another one like Lord of the Rings where it kind of feels like kind of just like a long movie.
Yeah.
But that's, I think, also kind of a testament to it. So, I don't know. What do you think? What do you think about removing Jurassic Park and Home Alone for sure, and then having a discussion about Terminator versus Alien? Because I'm obsessed with Alien. Like,
I think Alien's the pick because it's a more important movie. I think Terminator 1, 2 is better than Alien, Aliens, but I think Aliens is more important than Terminator 2.
I think Alien is better than Terminator. I think T2 is better than Aliens.
Yes.
T3.
But I think on balance, those are more important too.
Yeah, probably. Especially because you go from like a strictly horror film to the second one being a James Cameron blowout. That's okay. So let's just do this then.
So do you want to start at the top and talk about that?
Sure.
So I think the top three are right.
I agree.
I think I would put Toy Story above Godfather.
I would too, just because of the completeness of the trilogy. What do you think, Cody?
Yeah, that's totally fair. I think, and then that's subject to how Toy Story 4
Yeah,
comes out.
that's pending.
Yes.
We can't judge it yet based on Toy Story 4. I was a little unfair in that regard.
It's understandable.
I would then probably want to put, I want to live in a world where Planet of the Apes and Bourne are higher than series where there is an obvious weak link, because there isn't in either of those two.
I think that's fair.
So I might want to go like Godfather then, but with the understanding that like, I think Back to the Future and Indiana Jones are so iconic, it's gonna be hard. So maybe we just mix a little bit, like, so that we don't feel too weird about that.
Yeah.
So I might then go like Planet of the Apes 6, Back to the Future 7, Bourne 8, Indiana Jones 9, Alien 10.
How does that feel to you, Cody? Let's see.
I'm really liking the way that shakes out. I think.
Or wait,
Do you want me to say that again so that we can hear it, so we get like a complete view of what I was thinking and decide whether we think it makes any sense? So, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, Dark Knight, Toy Story, Godfather, Apes, Back to the Future, Bourne, Indiana Jones, Alien.
I like it.
I think
now
that's
I'm really
fair.
excited to see this Apes movie.
Oh, they're
If
so
you guys
good,
think it's
Cody.
that high, then
Cody,
I definitely
yeah.
need to go see it.
Cody, this second
Makes no
one,
sense.
yeah, the second one is out of this
Isn't
world.
the first one a little bit older, and then the second two are more modern movies?
They all
do I get
came
that
out
right?
around the same time.
Oh,
So there's a Tim Burton one that you might be thinking of that's in between. So there's like the old Charlton Heston.
That's like the
ones from,
2000 one, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's like the Charlton Heston ones from the 60s, and then there's a very long break, and then they decided Mark Wahlberg was just the right guy to reboot this with Tim Burton. And that's like 2000, and then nothing, and then there's a very good James Franco one, and then James Franco is just not involved anymore, and it gets better.
okay.
That's Rise of the Planet of the Apes, right? The first.
I literally
I think
never
Rise is
remember.
the first, and it's good. Dawn of the Planet of the Apes is the second, and it's incredible.
Stellar.
And then War for the Planet of the Apes is, again, amazing. So, I'm really happy with that list. And I like having
I
Back
love
to the
this
Future
list.
over Bourne, because I think that Back to the Future 1 and 2 stand far enough apart from that series that it can afford to have a weaker third installment.
I agree.
Awesome. And I think then what we've done is come to a definitive list of movie trilogies.
That's how
All
it feels
right.
to me.
Do you want to recap them one more time, Cody?
Sure. So at number 1, Lord of the Rings. Number 2, Star Wars 4 through 6. 3, The Dark Knight Trilogy. 4, Toy Story. 5, The Godfather. 6, Planet of the Apes. 7, Back to the Future. 8, The Bourne Trilogy. 9, Indiana Jones. And 10, Alien.
Wonderful.
Cody, that was some top-notch, absolute top-notch guest hosting. That's a fantastic topic, and you've done great.
Incredible, well put together list.
Thank you for having me, guys. It was a lot of fun.
This is long overdue. We're glad we finally had you on.
Totally.
As a quick reminder to folks, our theme music was composed by Kevin MacLeod, and our artwork, per usual, was done by Erin Sant. Find her at Sant Design on Instagram. And actually, Mike, I guess you have a big announcement. The Instagram is coming in hot for us.
This is the part of the episode that makes me so nervous now.
Yeah.
So you can find us all over the place. If you're looking for the podcast, check it out at Podbean, Stitcher, Spotify, the Apple Podcast app, somewhere else that Kyle always reminds me of, or wherever you get your podcasts. We're all over the place. If you're looking for us on the internets or any of our social platforms, you can email us at toptenkm@gmail.com. We do check it very often. You can check us out on Twitter at toptenkm, or very soon you can check us out on Instagram, handle TBD. But one of our podcast's very dear friends is going to be helping us with that. She will also be helping us make our Twitter more than just an auto feed, so there will be content coming your way. That's where to get us on the internets.
Thank you for that summary, Michael. Thank you for being here this week. I will catch you next week if you are still willing.
I am still keen. Thanks, Cody.
Yeah, thanks, Cody.
Thanks, guys.
Green Gucci shoe. No, the lyric is green Gucci suit, but I'm hearing myself in feedback, and it's making me want to say shoes because Cody got shoes. So green Gucci suit for Cody's green Gucci shoes, which probably aren't green. Probably
They
not.
do have a little bit of green in them. There's like those 3 Gucci color. It's like Gucci loafers, but I think it's green, red, and white, like the little tiny stripes.
I like this so much. So it's like the Italian flag.